Today on CityCast Denver. When the Broncos wrapped up another dismal season 1 year ago, we had high hopes for the future. New owners were coming in with deep pockets. They hired a promising new coach and made a big splash signing superstar quarterback Russell Wilson. But then it all went wrong. Our sports guy, Jake Shapiro from Denver Sports, is back to explain how the new-look Broncos fell apart and where he sees hope for the future. Today is Monday, January 9th, 2023. I'm Bree Davies, and this is CityCast Denver. Jake Shapiro, welcome back to CityCast Denver.
Love being on the show. Happy New Year to all the listeners. And hey, is this the year the Nuggets do it, Bree? I know you're excited. 2023, I've already got it earmarked down.
I'm trying to bring people over to my side. You think the Broncos aren't great? You should see the Nuggets. They're amazing. But we are talking about the Broncos because they're kind of not doing great. But Jake, we had a conversation a couple months ago about these high hopes we had for the Broncos. What happened?
I want to go back to 2 conversations ago we had about bringing Aaron Rodgers here with Patty Calhoun, the editor of Westward. And one of the reasons why Nathaniel Hackett, who is a Nepo baby, was hired as the head coach of the Denver Broncos was he was the offensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers. So a lot of the thoughts at the time was that this guy's going to come in, he's going to help facilitate something with Aaron Rodgers, he's going to come into Denver, and they're going to be great together like they were in Green Bay. That didn't happen, and Hackett had no prior relationship with Wilson. Hackett, like I just said, he's got a long history in football because his dad was a head coach in college football. His dad was
the Nepo baby. Okay.
Yep, his dad was a coordinator for a long time, but no real relationship with Wilson. And he comes here, and Russ is good at doing one specific thing, and Rodgers in Green Bay was good at doing this other specific thing as a quarterback. And they tried to mesh those 2 systems together, and there were communication issues. Hackett kind of seemed lost, as would anyone taking on that much responsibility just in general. But with all those meshing and, the things that come with being a first-time head coach, he just failed. Like, it was a colossal failure. He was the quickest fired NFL head coach since 1978, aside for ones that had massive scandals or, did something nefarious.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about, was about the quickness of this. This is 15 games into his first season as head coach. Is that so you're saying this is kind of precedent setting? This doesn't happen often.
No, and they gave him $40 million for, I think, 5 years. So they were prepared to be long term. But when they signed that contract, there were different owners in place.
Oh, and this was pre the Walton Penner.
Yep, the Walton Penners come in right before the Wilson contract extension, but after they had already made the trade for Wilson and after they had already signed up Hackett to be the head coach. So it makes sense when you realize there's new ownership. They might want their person to be the coach. They didn't pay $5 billion, $4.5 billion for this thing to be bad.
Uh-huh. Speaking of this idea of Hackett not working with Russell Wilson, Russell Wilson, is he terrible? Is he just in a moment of bad PR?
Well, everything that follows Russell Wilson might be a moment of bad PR because he seems like a very good person. He seems like he donates his time and money to charity. His wife is awesome, a fierce, awesome pop star. But he is just corny. Everything that comes out of his mouth it gets construed in this very weird way. Oh. The thing that went viral that most people in Denver might remember is the thing he was doing when they were flying to London. He was doing high knees up and down the aisle to keep his legs loose because he was coming back from an injury. And he's just corny, and it rubs people the wrong way. And his teammates have been very vocal, ex-teammates in Seattle, about him, and what that's like and not being the best for the locker room. His new teammates in Denver are very weirdly in love with him to the point where it's suspicious. But the big question you just asked, is Russ cooked? And the answer, no one really knows right now. He can't do the things he used to be able to do 10 years ago when the Broncos played the Seahawks in a Super Bowl.
Sure.
He's not as athletic. He doesn't throw the deep ball as well. But he is a very accurate passer at times in his career in Seattle, and he hasn't been that. He's also a shorter guy. it seems as though he's struggling to see over his offensive line and throw the ball over the middle of the field. And his athleticism in the past would let him get out of the pocket, they call it, out from behind the offensive line and throw the ball on the run. And he's not really that athletic anymore. It also seems as though he's bulked up, which is great because you'd think he'd be able to take some of those hits and he'd be able to run more. Well, it seems like it's costing him a step in some of the agility and made him great in the past. So the question is, can Russ revamp and reinvent himself at 34 years old, which used to be the age that quarterbacks fell off a cliff until we were introduced to Tom Brady? Can Russell Wilson be one of these new age quarterbacks like, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and be great into their 40s? And the answer right now, it's looking like a hard no. And it's looking like the Broncos committed $250 million.
This is what I'm wondering. Why did we pay that much money for someone you're telling me maybe wasn't worth $250 million?
And they traded a lot of things. They traded 2 first-round picks, a couple good players. It's just simply he had a great name. And they were panicking because it's been a long time since there's been a good quarterback in Denver, Peyton Manning, and they looked like they were out on Aaron Rodgers. So they made a move for Russell Wilson, who any team in the league could have had since 2017 because Seattle's been trying to trade him, and they overpaid. And not only did they do that, but once he got here, they signed him to a massive contract extension worth $250 million, with about 170 of it guaranteed. So they didn't need to do that second part, but once you commit all those resources, it almost feels as though you need to keep him here, although he did already have 2 years left on his contract before they signed it. So potentially we're looking at Russell Wilson as the quarterback for the Denver Broncos for the next 6 seasons after this one. Realistically, he's probably going to get cut after the next season or 2.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll just cut our losses and that'll just cost a pretty penny, but it wouldn't be worth it for us to keep him for 6 more seasons.
And the reason they can't do it right now is because they've committed so much money to him that they actually wouldn't be able to afford much around him, because when you cut a player with guaranteed money in the NFL, it counts right away towards the salary cap. So if the Broncos cut him this offseason, they barely be able to field a team next season.
So they can't. It's like they're just in a bind right now where they can't.
Yes. Their best option moving forward is likely just seeing if they've got anything left in Russell Wilson this next season. If they don't, they're going to tank it and they're going to draft a quarterback going into the 2024 NFL draft. But look, we're talking about that being maybe the best case scenario, and that means the Broncos won't be good for another several seasons.
Oh, again, another reason to get on the Nuggets bandwagon.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm thinking about this like bigger picture, right? The team's not doing great. Russell Wilson's not doing great. We just fired our head coach, but it's also, we got this news about the stadium that the new owners are going to do $100 million in renovations, which probably means we're going to keep the stadium here. But what does that mean in this bigger picture you're painting for me?
Yes and no. It means they're going to keep the stadium here.
Okay.
They have so much money. They're the richest ownership group in the NFL, the Walton Penner family, and they have the resources, if they want to not only upgrade the stadium, but build a new one while they're upgrading it. Kind of like the Stapleton Airport, if you remember that whole thing. So there's a chance that they're going to upgrade the stadium. Great. They'll use it for another couple seasons, and then they're going to start way on a new stadium. Now, the biggest question long-term with the Broncos is that new stadium going to be downtown, or is it going to be out in the suburbs or out even further? And I think that's a question core to the heart of the city of Denver and the culture around Denver. We haven't gotten great indication. There has been some murmurings that some of that land being purchased in the northern parts of the city is from the Broncos ownership group. We don't know that for sure, but one thing to note is the Cronkies, who are the cousins-in-law by marriage, blah, 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 they're all one family, own a lot of land downtown. And would they maybe do a land swap and make one big mega stadium district around Ball Arena with the Broncos? And that's one of the interesting things going on here. And the reason why they want to build a new stadium, even though it seems like they just did build a stadium, because they did, is they didn't put a dome on it. So they see a lot of money in the potential of having at least a retractable roof stadium in Denver, for those winter events.
And it could be, you're saying, I mean, there's obviously tons of speculation happening here, but like because of the Kroenke Walton connection, it could be this mega complex of like ballerina, new unnamed stadium in the same place. And it honestly would be a little bit closer to downtown. And there's a ton of redevelopment that's about to happen in Sun Valley where the stadium currently is. So it could really fundamentally change the landscape of our city center.
This is something that the Montforts did, and it's happening all over the country. Build a district right next to their stadium. They did it with McGregor Square, where they can profit on all the beer sales after and before the game, all the food sales. They just
bought El Chapultepec catty corner to Coors.
Exactly.
Makes total sense.
So, and this is something that when the Walton Penner Group bought the Broncos, they said, hey, where are the areas we can make more money? New stadium district, and expanding our reach internationally. And that's why their team president is a former international person from the NFL office. They just hired a marketing person this week who used to work for the Asian Pacific division of like Mattel or something. So they're going to go hard after growing the Broncos brand outside of Denver because, you know, all 6 of us at the table right now, all 5 of us at the table, and everyone in the city of Denver knows who the Broncos are and likely has been to a game or watched it on TV. So there's not much room for growth there.
That's a good point. I also like this idea that you're sharing that $100 million on a renovation is kind of pocket change for this ownership group.
They might cut Russell Wilson and eat $100 million on that. They might spend more money on paying Russell Wilson not to play for the Broncos than they do on renovating the stadium.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I want to just pull back a little bit and talk about something else that's happening in the football world because I feel like it's infiltrated every aspect of online conversation for sure. Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin collapsed on the field during Monday Night Football last week, and at the time of this recording, he was still in the hospital. What does that mean for football? What does this whole thing mean?
We're watching a gladiator sport. And I think when people sign up and watch football, they have come to the conclusion that they're okay with watching a terrible concussion, potentially paralysis, potentially a life-changing injury. But we think that when that's going to happen, it's going to be some kind of terrible head hit, head collision, some, one-off play. What is scary about the Hamlin thing is it was a hit I saw 1,000 times this weekend alone. It was a very normal shoulder to chest hit that you see all the time. And from my days of being involved with Little League Baseball, 8-year-old baseball players actually wear a thing called a heart guard, which is a little protection pad. So if the ball,
hits them right there,
it won't stop their heartbeat. Wow. And I wonder if we're actually going to have a little change in the way the equipment is in football because the players continue to get bigger, faster, stronger, while the field remains the same size and the rules remain relatively similar. So I think this is just a very scary moment. And thankfully, it seems like he's going to be okay because he's got movement in his hands and feet today. But I don't think anyone thought there could be a all of a sudden heart issue in football.
Someone that young.
Yeah, but this goes into a far deeper conversation about how the NFL treats its players and the problems they've had in giving them benefits post-retirement. Like if Damar Hamlin never played a down again of football, he's screwed. Like he won't get money, like his family won't have money, his future children won't have money for tuition, all that stuff. So there needs to be a larger conversation in the NFL, and the union needs to hold out for guaranteed contracts to players. Like I just said with Russell Wilson, he signed a $250 million contract. Well, the Broncos can get out of it and not have to pay about $75-80 million of it because contracts in the NFL are not guaranteed, unlike every other sport. The union hasn't stuck up for that. So there's all sorts of problems with the way the players are treated from a health standpoint, but I don't think anyone was surprised to see potentially a death on an NFL field. I think it's more the surprise of the way it happened. I mean, every time I watch football, I sign up for knowing, hey, I could watch someone die.
Yeah.
And it's really scary.
It is really scary. And I think the scary part too is, like you're saying, the after effects. How does someone, if they don't have any comprehensive care, if they don't have money after that, that's terrifying.
Quarterback for the Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa, has had 6 concussions in his career already, 3 this year. They're sitting him down, it seems like, finally. But, we saw his limp body convulse on the field earlier this season. No one wants to watch this.
No.
But we cannot give up our addiction to football, and this comes with that addiction to football.
Let's end on a good note. Everyone I know here who loves football is super excited because NFL Hall of Famer Deion Sanders was hired to coach the CU Buffs. Jake, I know this means a lot to you. Tell me what is so exciting about Deion Sanders being a Colorado guy now.
Well, it's funny because I'm an adjunct professor, so I can say he's like my coworker at CU Boulder. Just a crazy thing to say, but the Colorado Buffaloes have been a terrible football program for 20 years. There were some massive scandals in the 90s and 2000s, and the University of Colorado, from a faculty standpoint, decided they didn't want any of the noise and issues that comes with being a good football program, and they basically killed the football program. There were sanctions, and there were all sorts of other issues that prohibited CU football from reaching the levels that it had priorly reached, which, was a national title. And they've been bad for a long time. This commitment to Deion Sanders is a commitment to them saying, hey, we want to seek glory. And it is really interesting because CU just hired a new president, Todd Salomon. They actually changed some of the transfer rules, which is allowing Deion Sanders to transfer a lot of his players at Jackson State to CU, as well as other people who would not have qualified to go to the University of Colorado. Look, I love that school. It's not the Harvard of the West. Like,
Sure.
I barely did any homework in my past. Like, come on. So, I love to see them making that commitment. As for can Deion Sanders lead them to national promise, I don't know. But it's the closest Colorado football has come to relevant since 2001. It's been a long time. And, Bree, you've lived here for a long time. You would tell the listeners, when CU football is at its height, it was bigger than the Broncos.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the only college team I know about in this state. And I mean, you know what I mean? I've probably been to a Buffs game and no other college game.
Right.
It's that's how big they are.
Boulder, Colorado, I got one more meeting before I go to lunch. That's why you come in. I need your help on a great place for lunch. I mean, the kind of place that the food is so good, it makes you weepy and sleepy. All right? I mean, one of those type places. Let us know in your comments right now, and we're coming. You already know that hashtag. We coming.
Where would you tell your colleague, Coach Sanders, to go to lunch in Boulder? Because we know he was having a little trouble finding good food here.
Yeah. It's funny because he's bouncing around trying to find the good spots. Just go get a burger at Dark Horse, man. Like, they've got the starving student deal over there, $8 burger, beer, and fries. I talked about an adjunct professor at the university. My class final, I have a party. So this is an advertisement to students at CU. Take my class. I have a party at the Dark Horse for my class final because all semester long in my journalism class, Brie, I tell them the best place you're going to meet sources is at the bar. So where do I have my final? At the bar. Go talk to people.
Well, Jake Shapiro, thank you so much.
Love being on the show. Thanks for having me.
And here's what else Denverites are talking about. A Denver police officer has been indicted on assault charges related to the police shooting on a crowded street corner after let out in Lodo on July 17th. Officer Brandon Ramos was one of 3 officers who injured 5 innocent bystanders when they opened fire at a suspect attempting to flee arrest. According to the Denver Post, Ramos was suspended without pay after the indictment. And finally, we have new insight into the causes of Denver's chronic air quality problems. CPR News reports that air quality regulators have announced a major correction to the modeling data they submit to the EPA. Previously, the data showed that emissions from the oil and gas industry roughly match the emissions we produce from driving cars and trucks. Revised estimates now project that the oil and gas industry will account for the most harmful emissions in 2023 by far. While the industry disputes the new analysis, it will likely inform discussions over new regulations ahead of ozone season this summer. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell Deion Sanders about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter, Hey Denver, by texting Denver to 66866. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you later. Also, I've never heard of the Dark Horse. It has been here since 1975, and it looks insane on the inside. It has like a bar, a walk. The server server well at the bar is wagon wheels. It looks ridiculous. It looks like it's totally a hippie. Duh, it's a hippie bar.